Mark. So let's come on to the Federal Reserve Bank here. And first of all, we got a headline which says JPMorgan Chase and 40 other US banks conducting FedNow trial runs ahead of the instant payment services launch. So what is FedNow?
FedNow is just that, an instant payment service to go even in a transnational sense. One of the things I found looking through the documentation from the Fed itself and other sources was it would also make more efficient the remittances that illegal immigrants included make when they come to this country, earn a little money, and they send money back home, let's say to Mexico or Guatemala. Those are known as remittances. It would even help with those, which some people might find a little bit of an eyebrow raiser. But this instant payment service piggybacks on other existing such services. But the main point here for today's report is the media is doing a pretty all-out blitz to try and say, well, FedNow has nothing to do whatsoever with central bank digital currencies. And keep in mind that FedNow, this new instant payment transactional service, begins later this month. I believe it's July 23rd when they launch it. And this is the 110th year, just a footnote, of the creation of the Federal Reserve System itself, which is the central player. Of course, FedNow is from the Fed. Anyway, we have in this next slide just a little bit of explanatory information. Banking giant JPMorgan Chase and 40 other U.S. banks are acting on the Federal Reserve's payment plan, and they're getting really involved in this. According to a new Federal Reserve press release, some 40 banks and over a dozen service providers are wrapping up FedNow test trials, ahead of official launch of the service, which is scheduled for late July, like I mentioned. And moving on from there, we can kind of cherry pick this. This is Ken Montgomery, first vice president of the Fed Bank of Boston, and he's a FedNow program executive. We're on track for the FedNow service launch with a strong cohort of financial institutions and service providers of all sizes in the process of completing the final round of readiness testing. With go live nearing, financial institutions and their industry partners should be confident in moving forward with plans to join the network of organizations participating in the FedNow service. According to the Federal Reserve, FedNow aims to enable businesses and individuals to send and receive instant payments anytime. There's a little more explanation. The Federal Reserve says it plans to increase the number of banks using FedNow this year and in years to come until all 10,000, I guess there are 10,000 banks, have adopted this technology. So this will take a little while to be comprehensive. Other large banks testing the service to start using it in July. Those using it right away are the Bank of New York Mellon. That's a pretty big player. U.S. Bank Corp. And, of course, Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo is in court all the time with customer abuse charges and fraud charges. There's almost never a time that Wells Fargo is not in court, just a footnote. And here comes the Associated Press, the illustrious wire service, coming out proactively. And what I would say here is there's that old saying, thou protesteth too much. There's this almost off the page, unnecessarily aggressive effort by the press to shout down anyone that makes the slightest noise that FedNow and central bank digital currencies could have anything to do with one another at all. So here's Associated Press running ahead of the pack, claim they're doing their fact check here. The Federal Reserve is launching a digital currency app, FedNow, that will eliminate physical cash. AP's assessment, false. The Federal Reserve's FedNow is a service that allows banks and credit unions to transfer funds more quickly. I would say as if they're not quick enough. I would just add that. It's not a form of currency. No one ever said it was. Nor is it a move toward eliminating cash. Some have said that, some have not. The Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System stated. You'll notice that the Federal Reserve's word is gold to the Associated Press. And so the AP need have no other source than the Fed itself. They would rather question those who ask questions than look a little bit deeper like I'm doing today. So here's the Federal Reserve's own literature in this next slide. Is FedNow replacing cash? Is it a central bank digital currency? When I wrote about it back in April, I said that it might juxtapose or pave the way for a central bank digital currency. I never said, for instance, that it was one and the same thing. And very few people have said it's one and the same thing. So there's a little bit of a misnomer going on here. So is it replacing cash? Is it a CBDC? No, says the Federal Reserve. FedNow is not related to a digital currency. FedNow is a payment service the Federal Reserve is making available for banks and credit unions to transfer funds. Credit unions used to be a lot different than banks, no more. That's been eliminated. It, like other Federal Reserve payment services such as FedWire and FedACH, the FedNow service is neither a form of currency nor a step toward eliminating any form of payment, including cash, they claim. Um, I'll move on in the interest of time a little bit. We'll move on to the next slide. Frequently asked questions. This is more that the Fed is putting out there. What is a central bank digital currency? A CBDC is a digital form of central bank money that is widely available to the general public. It goes on to explain, it says that it will not replace cash, it will supplement cash. This is what they're claiming. And we'll move on from there. Why is the Federal Reserve, now notice this next item. Why is the Federal Reserve considering a central bank digital currency now? So in the very next item on this Q&A, they come right out and say that they're considering a central bank digital currency now. So it's very interesting. It's funny how it changes gears here. It talks about the potential benefits of a central bank digital currency, which is mostly an efficiency argument. What are the risks, which are relatively few, and so on and so forth, moving forward from there. Now it starts getting interesting. How can I learn more about central bank digital currencies or comment, etc.? And the Fed says, well, you got to read Money and Payments, the US Dollar in the Age of Digital Transformation. That's a good place to start. This paper concludes with a request for public comment, et cetera, et cetera. What are the Federal Reserve's ongoing technological initiatives related to central bank digital currencies? And it says the Federal Reserve is engaged in a number of experiments related to digital currencies, including a hypothetical central bank digital currency. These experiments enrich the Federal Reserve's policy discussions related to digital currency by giving experimenters hands-on experience with the technology's opportunities and limitations. See, so out of the other side of their mouth, even though FedNow is allegedly a separate thing, let's take their word for it right now. Central bank digital currencies are moving forward. It mentions that there's collaboration with the Bank for International Settlements, everybody's favorite friendly bank in Switzerland. And here's that actual document itself that the Fed refers to. Money and Payments, the US Dollar in the Age of Digital Transformation. So digging just a little bit deeper than the illustrious Associated Press, here it says, Introduction, the Federal Reserve is exploring the implications of and options for issuing a central bank digital currency. And then I underlined another part, a central bank digital currency would differ from existing digital money available to the general public because such a currency would be a liability of the Federal Reserve, not of a commercial bank. So central bank digital currencies, the Federal Reserve would become your bank, not the central bank of the commercial banks, but you'd cut out the commercial banks and deal directly with the Fed, which is a big move towards centralization in this 110th year of the Fed. And down here, you'll notice it says support faster and cheaper payments, including cross-border payments. I mentioned that it would help illegal aliens send money back home. Therefore, that could encourage potentially more illegal immigration. Now, it says the introduction of a central bank digital currency would represent a highly significant innovation in American money. Accordingly, broad consultation with the general public and key stakeholders is essential. And it says the Fed does not intend to proceed with the issuance of a central bank digital currency without clear support from the executive branch and from Congress, ideally in the form of a specific authorizing law. Other literature said unequivocally they would need a specific authorizing law to do this currency. Now they're saying, well, ideally we would need an authorizing law. And here's the aha moment. Recent improvements to the U.S. payment system have focused on making payments faster, cheaper, more convenient, and more accessible. Instant payments have been a particular active field of public and private sector innovation, and so on and so forth. Um, and I believe I have one more slide. It says that the best way to do that is through FedNow. But when you look at the overall report, you'll see that in this report, central bank digital currencies are on pages 13 through 17, and the payment system, pages 7 and 8, are all in the same report. So basically, the Fed in this report that it's referring to is juxtaposing central bank digital currencies and FedNow. And so basically, those two things are on a parallel track. We're told that they're not directly connected, but they are on a parallel track, and they're juxtaposed together in that report.
Yeah.
In my opinion, FedNow will be the infrastructure that would enable central bank digital currencies to have the proper conduit, if you will.
Yeah.
So we'll keep an eye on this, but if you look a little deeper, the Associated Press's claims don't ring totally true.
Okay, thank you for that, Mark.